Great, and welcome to the TADSummit Innovators. Really pleased to have Dave Horton here, founder of several open source projects, and of course, sponsor for TADHack and TADSummit. So thank you so much, Dave, and please introduce yourself and your journey to Jambonz.
Well, I've just been catching up with Johnny because we're sort of veterans of the prepaid wars.
Yes,
Guerrilla
that
wars,
are not dead or in jail, or made it
so
through.
Yeah, so I guess I'll start way back then to cover that. So in the 90s, I was part of a small startup, Open Development Corporation, and we sold prepaid calling systems. This was before voice over IP. And so it was just a heck of a lot of fun. It was the first startup I'd worked for, and I just loved, going in at 3 a.m. and shutting a big system down and then racing to get it upgraded and back up. And it was just a fantastic time. And that company got sold to Glen Air in around 1999. And then I started my own company called Pactolis, which initially we were selling, we sold a platform, or people would call it switches, or people would call it programmable voice telecom. And it had a service creation environment, so you could build your own kind of applications to a certain extent. And prepaid was the first thing that we built. We sold a lot of prepaid. And prepaid started trending down, so we started selling calling card, and we built conferencing applications. WebEx actually used, before they got acquired by Cisco, their first audio conferencing application was Pactolis. Global Crossing used our platform for their large event conferencing and their reservationless conferencing. We displaced Polycom there, I think. So that was also a lot of fun. In about 2008, I left the company. We had a combination of the financial crisis was causing our customers not to pay, and that was very challenging. And this different outlook that I had with our VCs. We couldn't get on the same page as far as how to move forward, so I left the company. The company subsequently got sold to Radisys. But so I left, and I started looking for things to do. I was doing consulting initially, building people custom applications. I was very interested in open source. So the last couple of years, as leading up to that, we'd seen FreeSwitch, we'd seen Asterisk kind of nipping at our tails, and I was always impressed. We were always able to fend them off, outsell them. But they were getting better and better. And I realized, this open source, the tempo, the turnaround was playing in their favor. They were getting people trialing it all the time because the price elasticity was zero. We, on the other hand, were spending a year in a sales cycle trying to land a dinosaur, right? Like Deutsche Telekom or something like that. So I really saw the power of the open source in terms of how quickly software could progress and get better. And I'm sort of an engineer at heart. I like building stuff. I like seeing that happen. And I guess I was a little bit jealous. So so I started an open source project that became Dractio, which is a programmable SIP server. And I thought there was a space for it in the market. You'd had FreeSwitch, you had Asterisk, so you had these things which were a bit like Swiss Army knives. They could do a lot, but they weren't really accessible to web developers. You kind of had to take a deep dive, go down a rabbit hole for a year, and learn a lot about VoIP and a lot about FreeSwitch, a lot about Asterisk. And if you're a web developer, you just didn't want to do that. At the same time, in the web world, there was all sorts of exciting things going on with Node.js, new ways of building HTTP middleware. And I thought, well, okay, there's a slot to bring some of that into the voice over IP world. That's what Dractio was. So open source SIP server. So, started as a passion project, nights, weekends. Slowly, more of my consulting work was on top of it. So that was good. And so, there I was for a while. The business was one-man business, just building applications on demand for people, trying to get them to use Dractio to do it, and bringing in other open source as well, like RTP Engine and sometimes FreeSwitch and so forth. That was pretty good. And then I started to feel like I was missing something. I was building stuff for people, and they would go away with it. I wasn't building anything on my own. I wanted to build something on my own. And at the same time, I was building a few one-off projects for people that were leaving Twilio, or they were leaving Rescom. They were leaving these CPaaSs. So I started to understand what these CPaaSs were. And I was building them little point solutions that was essentially an exit ramp off of Twilio onto this. And, so of course, what I was building only worked for their use case. It wasn't a general thing. But as I started to look at it, and I kind of started thinking, well, I think I could build the whole thing that Twilio has. least the voice part of it. And I became enchanted with that idea, like just doing it. Like, can one person kind of, there's all this marketing out there that says, oh no, you know, Twilio's got to be, you need a huge company. I mean, Twilio had all this marketing. Rescom had all these crazy slides about, well, no, it took us 100 man years to do this. Don't try this. And I started to not believe it. And I was started, like I say, to kind of get, it's almost a thought experiment. Like, can I do this? So the next customer that came along kind of helped me fund it to do it. He was leaving Rescom. And so using that as a starting point, I built Jambonz. And it took me about 1.5 years. Didn't take too long. And it's not because I'm great at anything. It's just what open source has done to the programmable comms community. So I was able to assemble a lot of it from great software like RTP Engine. And of course, I use Droctio and I use Node.js and I use FreeSwitch for some pieces. So I proved to myself that, yeah, I could do it. And when I finished it, that was great. I had this one customer and I was sort of like, okay, great. You know, of course, again, I'm a stupid engineer. Like, I built it, they'll come. I got pretty depressed for about 6 months because no one was coming. And I thought, okay, well, I still don't mind. It was fun. And that was kind of my goal. But slowly, then people did start coming. The word got out a little bit. I haven't done any marketing, unfortunately. I really need to work on that aspect of things. But things did improve. And to the point, and particularly in 2 areas. So it appealed to people that maybe they were using a CPaaS like Twilio, Rescom, Plivo. They weren't an enterprise. They were maybe more of a communication service provider. And so they liked Jambonz because really for 2 reasons. One is you can deploy it yourself on here. You don't have to use the hosted cloud. You can deploy it on your own prem stuff, or we have a hosted service, so you can do that. And this has become more and more important in sort of this age of data privacy. The people less and less comfortable with, okay, I'm going to run something on someone's server, and oh yeah, it's going to have all the recordings of my customers and everything they say, and I'm fine with that. Well, people aren't fine with that anymore. So they want more control over this and maybe run it in their own environment, you know, their own lock and key, everything inside there. And the other reason just is down to open source itself. They can push their own innovations into it a lot faster. It's like software with a permeable boundary, right? You can push things in. You're not standing on the outside of knocking on a door saying, hey, when's the next release drop? And then you pick through it like a cow turd trying to find out if your little feature you asked for is in there, right? I mean, open source, you can drive innovation into it.
Yeah.
So this is the one space that, you know, CSPs attacking verticals, you know, whether it's financial tech, whether it's voice dispatching applications, things like that. And then more recently, the other sort of industry that Jambonz has done well in terms of uptake is conversational AI. Companies building voice bots, building omni-channel contact center, really. And they've got the AI experience, and they know how to build a good low-code editor, and they know how to integrate with all the CRMs, but they don't know voice. So they take Jambonz and make it a voice gateway. So, and in this space, Jambonz competes with a commercial product called AudioCode's Voice AI Gateway. And over the last years, I've had a lot of success winning business off of them. So companies like Cognigy, Avamo, Prodigal Tech, others that won't let me mention them, which is a real pain in the neck, have all migrated towards using this. So it's been pretty powerful and puts me in an interesting place too, because I'm sort of right at that junction of working very closely with all the speech recognition companies, because I try to support all of them. Yeah. And at the same time, understanding how people are using these systems for voice conversations, which still have a long way to go to really be improved. Yeah. So that's kind of the journey of Jambonz, and from product side, I guess.
Yeah. No, and I think this is a very interesting juncture, because you get to see the real data around how they're performing. Because again, there's a lot of marketing gloss out there, And the reality, it's getting better. Don't get me wrong. I mean, we have practitioners, we have Voxist, we have,
who runs their stuff on Jambonz, I should say.
Yes,
I was waiting for him to give me a plug during his talk. And he didn't, but example of a company that left Rescom and run on
he's French. He's French.
Yeah, Carell is.
And wonderful.
And that was my introduction, just to say that, Carell asked me, it's like, I'm having these issues, who do you recommend? And I said, well, he's been sponsoring me for ages now. We should go on today. It's like, look at the events you're attending.
Yeah.
Well, Dave, I'd like to jump in. You're being quite humble. So being from the calling card industry and knowing, there's a $2 billion industry called prepaid calling cards. And Pactulis was one of the two solutions for all of those products. So you're really kind of putting that in the back burner. For me, it's exciting because I think you're at an incredible juncture in the industry, because all that marketing and hype and the Twilio and the 70 billion in market cap that they lost, and all these messaging aggregators that are really just 10% margin messaging aggregators are calling themselves CPaaS companies by putting lipstick on their numbers and what have you. What I see, just because I think the industry is at a tremendous inflection, is an opportunity. You've got all these, and I know this firsthand from a couple of companies, one that I have ownership in and one that I'm working with to help get acquired, is they're trying to build what you have. Have you thought about partnering with the messaging industry, which is a large percentage of Twilio's revenue? So the voice part is the harder part. The messaging part is the Wild West, like the calling card industry was. So, I mean, I'm excited to learn all about you and see how, obviously being a sponsor of the TADSummit, I've been involved now for a few months with Alan, and our whole goal is to bring capital to innovation. And I look at the TADSummit, TADHack as all the smart kids. Do you see an opportunity for that, for bringing your product and your expertise to companies that just can't figure that out?
Well, specifically in terms, you asked about messaging particularly?
I'm talking about messaging companies that are calling themselves CPaaS companies, but are really only delivering messaging. I mean, look, Cinch why did Cinch buy Telequint? Nobody knows. Cinch knows.
Right.
Why did Infobit buy Peerless? Why are they're trying to acquire what you already have? So you're an easy way, and you're not looking to control the animal. I see whoever's doing your marketing needs to shift to all these companies that can win business from a lot of these bigger players by having the right tools.
Yeah, I guess my response would be, and we're talking now about an area where you know a lot more than I do, so it may sound stupid to you, but I guess my response would be, first of all, yes, to the extent there's companies, as you're describing, that are doing messaging, calling themselves a CPaaS, have an intent to really be a CPaaS, which means include the voice, then I think Jambonz would be a no-brainer for them, and I would love to work with them. It's interesting with messaging itself, regard to supporting messaging in Jambonz. Early on, I had a conversation with a guy in the industry that I know is a really smart guy, and he said, I was talking about building Jambonz at the front end of this whole saga, and he said, well, you really got to support SMS because that's where Twilio makes all their money. I said, okay. And I did that. I added support technically for SMPP, so you could do all that stuff. And exactly 0 people have ever used it. So I was like, okay. And I also looked at messaging and said, well, that's pretty simple. And how can I bring a solution to people when they already have these simple solutions? And how can I bring a solution? The real problems they have is access to these networks and the costs and all the hurdles and all that shit. And how can I address? I don't think I can address any of those. So I've sort of, in my mind, I've said, yeah, okay, messaging, I'm not bringing a lot to that area. So I may be wrong about that, but I do think someone who wants to be a CPaaS, starts from messaging, now needs to do the harder thing of voice.
And that's what I'm talking about. So basically you have all these messaging companies that can't do what Jambonz can do. I mean, Twilio built out an amazing voice platform. I mean, Doug Gardner, who was there for many years, he built that all out. So they have that piece of it, the voice part. So, you know, what is Twilio? It's voice and messaging, period.
Yeah.
That's really it. And then you have other products and tools, and they call themselves a software company, which they're really just a telecom company, which people are starting to find out now. So I'm intrigued by and I hope a lot of these messaging companies hear this and hear you out there, because they're trying to build what you already have built on open source. Yeah. So they could actually go to market and have a better product, selling into the operators, selling to enterprise, or what have you. So I think it's exciting. I think you should be screaming it to the messaging industry.
Yeah. All right. Well,
that's just my opinion and just my viewpoint from being on, I would say, the messaging side, but coming from voice and knowing what you built at Pactolus and knowing the integrity and the credibility and the reliability of your platform that you built that handled billions of minutes of prepaid calling card traffic. I mean, you're downplaying where you came from. And I think you should be upplaying where you came from, because it's voice and messaging. And that's all. And all this fancy marketing and words, really, it's just all noise. So I'm excited for you and your company. And Alan, you got to start screaming to some of your relationships, as I will as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, one area, and this sort of links into some of the fun we've been having this week, of course, is a lot of carriers are, doing the, One API 2.0. And, Deutsche Telekom is a nice example of how it's taking a ridiculously expensive CPaaS, from Ericsson, and somehow, applying it across a lot of existing APIs from the messaging and voice space. Now, carriers are looking at, getting into this business. Again, do you see what you've got with Jambonz as being relevant for enabling maybe a smaller carrier who is really looking at the operations side? So it's like, we need to we understand we need to be a tech co. So we need to have ownership of the technology and the roadmap, which means open source. Otherwise there's just too much money going out of the window. So I'm just interested in, have you had any discussions with any of the carriers in adopting Jambonz?
I really haven't, but it's fun, which is funny because that's sort of my background. I mean, when we at Pactolus, we've sold almost exclusively to carriers. Yeah. And I agree, it makes a lot of sense. So I'd love to have those conversations. Unfortunately, I tend to be heads down, sort of building stuff. It's a very interesting thing, just from switching to business models and trying to do open source as a business model. What I'm building is not that different. It's updated than what I built at Pactolus, but in the commercial model with VCs, that was looked at and it was funded to the tune of like 45 employees. Yeah. Open source, same thing, funded to the tune of two people. So there's a lot less resource to do stuff. Which is one reason why I picked open source in the first place, because you have to kind of crowdsource a lot of what you're trying to accomplish.
Exactly.
But I've sort of fallen down on the whole marketing outreach. I would love to talk to carriers. I mean, I see these deals, and to me, it just looks stupid. Some of the stuff, and so I figure, okay, well, that's the last stupid person just walked across walked across the stage. There's no point in going looking for another one because nobody else could be that stupid. But
the stupid people are lining up. Yeah. They're lining up.
Yeah.
We had that conversation yesterday with Alan online. They're lining up to be stupid because they want a piece of the action.
Exactly. And
the market is growing.
Yeah, market's growing, but also I'm seeing messaging companies buying what they think are, voice-centric CPaaS, because they've got the messaging stuff, they've got all the deals. It's very simple from a the technology is not difficult from the messaging side. It's all the deals, all the wheelie dealing, that's all the relationships, that's the hard side. But they want to get on the voice piece because it's $1 trillion industry, that's yes, it's in decline, but hell, it's $1 trillion industry and it's a natural fit. So
yeah, my sense is that carriers are good at operating things, and not much, and acquiring and installing and operating, but not. Even if they buy a commercial solution, they need a relationship with that vendor where all the innovation is really going to come from. So open source should be a slam dunk for them because it's all about driving innovation. So yeah, I think a relationship with using Jambonz and a relationship with the team and having us drive innovation for carriers makes a lot of sense, because it's not in their DNA to make that part happen.
No, internally. It isn't. They're operations companies. I've always said, I mean, that's part of the challenge that, they have in this whole tech-co vision that they're being sold on within the telco ecosystem. I mean, it was pointing it out with Amit News. We were doing a mobile ecosystem forum panel session. So he's got his predominantly open source based platform for wholesale, and I was pointing out, look, it's mainly open source based. You can, as a carrier, you can take an instance of it, which Telin has, and operate it yourself and resell that as a service. Or, if you don't feel that confident in owning your own roadmap and having the skills to, deal with, all the real world stuff that happens when you have a product and it's, operational, then you can ask, Amit to run it on your behalf. So you've got, that halfway house, so that as they build up the skills, as they realize it's not that difficult, because a lot of it is perception based. They're like, we have to manage software, and we can't just point the finger at Ericsson and go, do it. And it's like, your margins aren't there anymore. Right. The world is very different. If you want to realize this tech-co vision, it's not having nice conversations around tables with your legacy vendors. In fact, I made that point. It was an old friend from BT. He's been in BT for decades. I won't say how many. Because he's not that much older than me. And he said to me, if there's one piece of advice from being on the fixed side through all these decades, is if you want to transform, you have to move away from your legacy vendors. Full stop. You cannot transform when you're still dependent on your legacy vendors. And that I was...
I mean, I guess the message I would have, I guess, for the messaging vendors and the carriers is, take a look at Jambonz, and you're going to see a full-featured kind of voice platform with actually some messaging support. And then consider how much innovation is coming out on this platform from a small team of 2 versus your audio codes versus your Twilio. And how is it that 2 people can do that? And what could happen if more resources were applied to it? Couldn't we then really innovate faster? I think that's what people should consider when they look at Jambonz.
No. Well, we're doing your marketing planning now, but
but this is really exciting for me personally.
So look into the future. So here you are with a great voice platform. And from TADHack, the developers love it. It's easy. I keep saying, you've got to make it easy. Getting the numbers, setting up, just in terms of how the API works, just intuitive and easy as the bywords. And it's not that easy for a lot of, the platforms that are out there, because they come more from, a telco pedigree. So it's, it's more complex. It's almost like they want to show how smart they are through their API. And it's like, no, don't do that. Make it as dumb as possible, so it just works without having to read the documentation. You can almost like intuit, how it's going to work. So going forward, how, where do you want to go, with Jambonz, or maybe with, sort of products around that set, given, you really understand now how to crank the open source, engine?
Yeah, I think there's 2 areas looking at, I guess. I mean, I obviously want to make Jambonz continue to be better and to innovate and so forth. And it has, it's kind of got it's a complete services-based business. So it's an MIT open source license. Everything is free. There's no open core, but, you kind of need this. So I dupe you into paying for a commercial license, or, dual license, but there's a lot of fuzzy stuff designed to give the lawyers heebie-jeebies. So I guess it's completely MIT open source. So I have no business model other than services.
Yep.
It has a nice little services business.
Yeah.
But because that, I'm not sure it ever would have an investment theme for large, as it stands right now. It would have to have a different take. And that's been okay. I've been trying to just build great software. Going forward, there's two areas I'm sort of interested in spending more time, and possibly they may have more of a commercial bent to a more of an investment theme. But I definitely first want to radically improve the voice experience, because a lot's been done, but you and I know, and everybody knows, I call into whatever Verizon, it's going to be a shitty voice bot experience.
Yeah.
It's getting better, but it's not there. And so I'm trying really hard to get the attention of the speech recognizer vendors, unsuccessfully, because they're not doing things. And I wrote a whole blog post about this. They don't understand conversational AI.
Yes.
And they're not doing the things they need to do that could really make this thing better. I'm sitting there and I'm seeing that. I'm right there at the juncture of their stuff and conversational AI. And there's things they could do to make it better. I want to really improve that.
That's true. Because that was on your TADSummit special. Because that was back in March, that piece you did. Yeah. I'm going to put a link.
The speech recognizers, they just go off and run their tests and over their data sets and proclaim their word error rates, but they're not thinking about how people are using this thing. Yes. There's just ways it can be much better. Yeah. I'd like Jambonz to lead the way on that, but I have to get some mind share from those guys.
Cool.
The second thing the area I find interesting, which could lead to building something on top of Jambonz. So there's, Jambonz is open source, and I think it will always be open source.
Yeah.
But I reserve the right to build a commercial application on top of it if I want
Absolutely.
to. I find the whole contact center space in an interesting state of flux right now.
Yeah.
And maybe opportunities there, in the sense that it's always been the voice guys driving that sale,
Yeah.
Back in, we go back to the 90s, so the Nortels and, the Switch guys, and then Genesis coming over the top with an API. And now you've got more of a jumbled thing where you've got these CXAI companies like Core, Core.ai, like Cognigy, Vamo, Jambonz customers, really getting customer share of mind, because customers want AI. Yes. So voice is, in their minds, is just plumbing that really ought to work. Oops.
Yeah.
So you got just the sales process got a lot of fingers in the pie.
Yeah.
And a company like Genesis, I think, is really vulnerable. They built their business on things like excellent skills-based routing. But in an age of AI, where an agent now can handle 50 products, not one product, is it necessary to get it to the right agent anymore? Is that even a thing if we use AI to route it, if we enhance the skill? So they're getting squeezed because customers don't want to talk to them. They want to talk to the AI guys. The pieces they put in the middle, they're not doing the front end conversational AI. They're not doing the agent assist. The routing piece in the middle is getting smaller. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity there for me to build a contact center solution that integrates really well with the conversational AI. So I'm looking at, so that's an area I'm looking. I just find that that area kind of interesting in that it's in a state of flux.
And that's, I would say that's confirmed by the recent NICE acquisition, because they're trying to integrate it all in.
Yeah.
So you could then help all those, so the Cognizes, the rest, compete far more effectively in that space. That's interesting. Exactly. I'd say that's definitely investable. I think that's an interesting juncture in the market as the big CSAS are all consolidating, scale, but not necessarily with the right performance. So that's an interesting one, definitely. Well, I think that's needs a lot more thinking and sort of segmenting the market and all the rest. But
for sure,
that's really.
I think you also brought up, look what we've done with two guys, and look what you're doing with $1 million budget.
Yeah,
right.
A month in some companies. So he's running circles around everybody. So I think I heard you correctly. What you were basically putting that out there, like, hey, look what I've built with two guys.
Yep.
And look at the amount of money that you guys are spending everywhere else. Why don't you come take a look at what I'm doing? Did I hear you correctly, Dave?
Yeah, exactly. I'm saying if you see the fastest race car on the track, maybe buy some more fuel for that one instead of the other ones.
And I think that's really the question that Alan was getting to, and I think that's where I think we need to get this out into the market from that perspective, Alan. Like, why are you guys wasting all this money and resources? And you've got all these, oh, we're an expert here, we're an expert there, but they don't realize the intricacies of 30, 40 years of voice experience that Dave had. I know it because I went through and watched his products for years in the prepaid industry, and you know it as well because you're Alan Quayle, and you know just about everything.
No.
So I'm excited. This is exciting. I'm excited for you, Dave. I'm excited for the company. I'm excited for where you're going to go and how we can help. We're going to take TADSummit and TADHack to a whole different level. Alan's becoming a little bit of a voice of truth in the industry these days. I'm not sure if you're aware of that, Dave. So,
well, I think it's definitely needed. I mean, it's always been a bit of an old boys, a lot of things designed to sustain the current generation of winners, whoever they were, a bit of an old boys club. So it's great to see that piercing some of that.
Yeah, Alan's leading the way. On that.
Being pushed along. But cool, Dave, this was excellent. It was so great to get that, history, to understand how relevant it is to where you are today, the successes you're building on, and then all the opportunities looking forward. So well done, Dave. This was an excellent session. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks so much for having me. It's great to catch up with you guys.